Hey, welcome back, everyone. Mike Vakovkian here on Pittsburgh Sports Now with another Pitt Panther podcast. 2 days ago, when I was on here talking, we brought up the possibility of Trey McGowens leaving. We talked about Femi Odukale possibly coming to Pitt, and in the last 48 hours, both of those have happened. We'll start off with the news that came about a couple hours ago, and that was that McGowens was leaving. He was entering the transfer portal after his second season with Pitt. Does it surprise me? No. And that's because it's something that we've been hearing about, whispers, throughout the season. It's one of those touchy subjects. You can't go on and just write articles about everything you hear. You need to have a little meat and some substance to what you're writing. But it didn't surprise me because it's something you just heard, that he necessarily wasn't not happy with Jeff Capel. This is something that actually we heard last year. Trey, from what I heard, was a little homesick, and he had trouble adjusting being up here from down in South Carolina. And at one point, it got real bad during the second half of last season, and coincidence or not, that's when he slumped a lot. Jeff Capel and his staff had to do a lot of working on Trey to get him back, and they did. But that's something to remind you about when you hear about these kids reclassifying. And this is no knock on Trey McGowens. We look at him as a basketball player. He's a Pitt band. He's a kid. When he came to Pitt, he was 17 years old. He should have been a senior in high school. Yet he's out here competing against in one of the best basketball conferences in the country. He had trouble being away from home. I assume we've been trying to get a hold of him since the news happened. Haven't been successful in doing that. But I'm sure that played a role in it. And I don't know the other reasons, and I don't want to speculate until I hear from him. But I'm pretty confident that was one of them. Just being away from home, being away from his family, and just not being totally comfortable up here. One thing that we did see, and I don't know, from an observer, either at games, on TV, whenever we could see it because of the crummy ACC network, but there wasn't a lot of chemistry on this team, and I think that's a problem. And I think that's one of Jeff Capel's biggest tasks this offseason is I don't know how you develop that, but there just seemed to be something not clicking with some of the players on the court, meaning team. And there seemed to be a lot of, and I think this came up in one of the players' quotes following the ACC tournament, talking about individual players worried about themselves, and they didn't seem happy out there, even though they were winning. When someone just something I just picked up, I've mentioned it throughout the years with friends, or throughout this past season with friends of mine, when we're talking Pitt or even some other people in the media that I speak with. It felt like something wasn't right, and maybe this played into it. I don't know, but Trey McGowens is gone, and the only bright spot in that when a player leaves is that at least they have somebody that can replace him, at least talent-wise, from what we hear. And now we have to be careful about that. Jeff has been very high in praise of Ethel Horton coming in this season from Delaware, and he's going to obviously step into McGowan's spot in the lineup at the 2 spot. But let's just be a little guarded about how good he's going to come in here and play. We have to see it first. I've heard a lot of coaches talk about this guy looks good in practice and this and that, but let's see when you do it against Florida State, North Carolina, Duke, Virginia. Let's see it when the money's on the line, as Mike Tomlin says, when the lights are on in the stadium. So I have no doubt that he's good. Let's see if he can translate that into ACC play. But the good part is they do have someone that is ready to jump in and play. Unlike if Xavier Johnson would have left they had nobody to replace him, and that would have been a big problem. So I mentioned this the other day on the first podcast. Not that I wanted either of them to go, because I didn't, but if you had to pick one to go, Xavier or Trey would have been more easily replaced than Xavier would have been. So now that is that. Is he the last one to leave? You would think yes, but I don't know that that's a guarantee. I'm not saying that someone is leaving, but I don't know. I asked somebody that was pretty close to the scene, did Jeff try to stop Trey from leaving? The answer was no. He told him, stay if you want, but there was no begging, there was no pleading to try to get Trey to stay, from what I heard. And that's something that I heard, in that, as far as whether or not anyone else is going to leave, Jeff Capel is going to have a very pointed message for players on the team, I think, this offseason. Is he wants players on this team that want to be here. And if you don't want to be here, meeting with the Pitt Basketball program, there's the door. I'm not going to beg you to stay. I don't know if that's an issue, but I heard that that's something that's going to be brought up. And I think that goes with the chemistry issue. And that's something that has to work on, that has to be improved this offseason. I think Pitt has talent. Pitt probably should have won a couple more games maybe than they did. Maybe this chemistry issue was a problem with that. So Pitt has 2 scholarships remaining, and that's because the other day, yesterday to be more exact, Femi Odukale committed to Pitt. And that's good. That's a good get for them. I thought that was going to happen, despite UMass and Seton Hall putting some pressure on to get him. Femi was drawn to Capel. He was drawn to playing in the ACC. He was drawn to playing with the big competition in the ACC. And I think he's going to be a valuable player. I think people just don't look at the stars. And he's a 3-star. Remember, Justin Champagny was also a 3-star player. And look what he turned out to be. He was Pitt's best player last year. I think this guy's going to be better than a lot of people expect him to be. He's going to be a versatile player. He can play 1 through 3. He'll defend. He'll spell Xavier Johnson some minutes. And he adds overall ACC depth on this team, which was something they didn't have last year. And they're getting more of it, and they'll be a better team next year because of that. It's interesting when you look at Pitt's overall rankings now. I was looking at 247. They're up to 30. And that's not with Femi counted as a 3-star composite player by 247 Sports. They only have him as a 2, so that's going to go up a little bit, which means that could boost Pitt up. And if they were to get William Jeffers from Erie McDowell, another 4-star player, I think Pitt has a chance to finish in the top 20. And that hasn't happened for, I actually don't know if I have it in my notebook. Yes, I do. I was working on this morning. It would probably go back. It would be Pitt's highest ranking since like 2013, when in 247, according to 247 Sports, they finished 31 overall. Right now they're 30. In 2018, they were 32. However, if they were to get Jeffers, that's going to bump them up a few spots, no doubt. And Pitt's likely to be in the 20s, and they haven't been in the 20s as far as team recruiting since 2012. So you're seeing the impact already. And by the way, I'll repeat this, and I still think it's going to happen. Just don't know when. I think Pitt, I'm very comfortable that Pitt's going to, I strongly believe that Pitt will land Jeffers, and this will be a very, very good recruiting class for them, and then he'll be on to 2021. one other thing I wanted to bring up here is, uh, does this change their expectations at all as far as next year losing McGowens? And I mentioned this when Xavier left. He had some critics out there in the fan base that, oh, good, let him leave. You don't want him to leave. And nobody should have wanted Trey to leave if he was okay with staying and the chemistry was going to be fixed. If he was going to return next year and there's just different factions on the team and they weren't going to be getting along, then that's better. Not saying he was the root of it, but if it's going to help to improve it, then it's better. But if that could have been fixed and everyone could have worked together, yes, you don't want to lose. It's foolish to say that you're better without Trey McGowens on the team. That's just not the case. But like I said, if things weren't going to be able to be fixed and there were going to be issues and stuff, then it's probably better than both sides part and then move on with it. But even without McGowens, I still believe that this team will contend and should be a tournament team next year. Barring any injuries on the team, I think this roster will be good enough to get Pitt into the tournament for the first time since 2016. It's pressure on Capel. I'm sure he relishes that. Not that he listens to me, but I think this team is good enough, and I think they have enough pieces to get there. So with the 2 spots now, I think one of them will go to William Jeffers, and then the other one will be a transfer. It'll be a transfer, I assume, a guy that can play a guard position, 1, 2, or 3, probably a guy that will bring some versatility, but most likely a guy that has some capability of shooting the 3, and that's something that they desperately need. We got a couple questions in here from the old fan base on the old Facebook page, Pitt Family for Life. Joe, my man Joe, he has a question and he wants to know, with Trey entering the transfer portal, does this help our chances with Jeffers? I don't think that one didn't matter. Jeffers and his family's decision, whatever they choose, it's going to have nothing to do with Trey McGowens. If he would have stayed, I think that it doesn't play one factor into whether or not he comes to Pitt or not. And the other thing is I keep wanting to bring this up because I think fans need to keep this in mind. I'm not saying it's 100%, but do not automatically expect William Jeffers, if he plays this year, if he comes to Pitt this year, it is no guarantee that he plays this year. It is not inconceivable that he would redshirt this year, considering his age, and to get himself physically, academically, and mentally ready to play in the ACC. Just keep that in mind. Not saying it's 100% going to happen, but I think it's definitely a possibility that, and I think it's something that both sides, if he chooses Pitt, that's obviously that has to happen first. But if he were to choose Pitt, I think that's something that Jeffers and his family and the Pitt coaching staff, that will be a conversation they have. If they feel that he's not physically, remember, he would be a high school senior, sort of like McGowens. Reclassifying isn't for everybody. So I want to keep that in the back of your mind in case you hear that next year. And I know as soon as if he commits to Pitt, everyone's going to start filling out their roster and their depth chart. This guy's going to go here, this is going to go there. Do not automatically pencil him in to be a guy in the rotation next year. He very well could be a guy for the 21-22 season. So just keep that in the back of your head. We have another question here. There's some people responding to Alan's McGowens, what went wrong with him at Pitt. Excellent article by the best beat writer in Pittsburgh, Alan Saunders. Check it out in Pittsburgh Sports Now. One other thing that I had a chance to talk to today is Nakai Johnson. And it's an interesting article if you want to check it out. He tweeted this out, and I got a hold of him right after he did. And it's interesting. He talked about the teams that continue to come after him despite him being committed to Pitt. He says, I'm 100% committed to Pitt. However, teams aren't buying that. They've been texting him, calling him, wanting him to make visits. So he wanted to put something out on social media today to try to stop the persistent communication with him from other coaches. And it's an interesting story he actually had with coach from Penn State. So you may want to check that out. But he's a Pitt guy. He's a WPL guy. He's probably going to be one of those guys. He's a rock of the class as far as people are going to be drawn to him, sort of like Dayon Hayes. He's sort of been the unofficial recruiter for Pitt. If you check him out on social media, he's always retweeting positive things that are happening at Pitt, recruits that are thinking about Pitt. He indirectly tries to recruit them. And I think that's going to be the same situation. That's going to be the same role that Nakai Johnson takes when he eventually signs with Pitt, whenever their recruiting is, as far as the coronavirus, whether he officially signs in December or February, depending on when there's a signing period. So that's it for today. And I'm sure we're going to have more news over the next few days. We'll be back when there's more information to talk about. But the next thing you definitely want to keep an eye on for is who Pitt starts sniffing around on in the transfer portal. Now that there's 2 spots available, they'll use one on a high school senior. The other one most likely will be coming from a player in the portal, and we'll find out who that will be. But appreciate you checking this out, and we will talk soon.